Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode is number 120, Quilting Do's and Don'ts. Stay tuned for the winner of last week's giveaway and the announcement of this week's giveaway. But before we get to the episode, I'd like to share another thing about the County Clare quilt from Bonnie Hunter. I had mentioned originally that she said press to the light, and I said, well, that doesn't really make sense. You might as well press to the dark. But I found another really good reason why you want to press to the dark. I am making 80 blocks, which means I need 160 units of each of the two pieces. And if you look at my greens here, they're pressed to the dark, so this is up, so this is where it feeds into the machine. And same with the blue unit, the pressed up, and this is where it gets fed into the machine. And you always want to do that if you're given a choice. Many times you're not given a choice. But when you can, you want to have it pressed up. And why? Because your feed dogs are feeding this bottom piece right here up. So it would be feeding up and into the other piece. I don't pin when these are pressed up. When they're pressed down, I always pin. And so on all of these 160 units, I never had to pin. And then even when you put the two units together, this is how it gets fed in. This doesn't meet anything. This is meeting the 2.5-inch green. This is the intersection that meets right here. So this gets fed in. This is also up. So again, I don't have to pin 160 of these together. And then even when you're putting it in for the block, it goes in like this. This is up. This doesn't meet anything. This is again the green. I only have to pin one unit. One intersection. This is also up. So I have to make 80 of these. And of all the intersections, that's the only one I have to pin. So it's really worthwhile to press towards the dark and not the light. I'm having a great time with mine. I hope any of you who are making it are also having a good time with yours. Now, let's get to the episode. Our hobby, quilting, is supposed to be fun. It should not be filled with frustration. It should be totally enjoyable, take you away from the difficulties of life. So here are my tips to help you stay having fun. First, pick fabric that you like. That may seem so simple, but I can't tell you how many times people come in the shop and say, which one do you like better? Doesn't matter which one I like better. You're the one who's going to be working on the project and sewing it. You need to like the fabric. Next, pick a pattern you will enjoy doing. If you cannot stand a certain unit, you can't stand the triangle and a square, or what was used to be called peaky and spike, don't pick a pattern that has 1,000 of those in it. I know I have one friend who can't stand half square triangles. So do rectangles and squares. Don't pick something that you're going to hate. I also have another point on that. Is make sure it's a technique that you like. I had a customer come in who wanted me to order her one of the Quiltworks patterns, that was like 110 by 110, and she'd never foundation paper pieced before. And I said, before you buy all this fabric and this expensive pattern, download a couple of foundation paper piece patterns for free on the internet and see if you like the technique first. She did. She liked it. She made it. It was beautiful. But can you imagine spending hundreds of dollars on fabric and a $50 pattern and then hating every minute of it? Life is too short. So do something you're going to enjoy. Now, to make sure that your pieces meet and you don't have frustration, you want to press your fabric, accurately cut, and sew with an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. Be sure you cut your salvages off. You don't want your salvages even in the back. When I put backing fabric onto the long arm and the salvage is still on it, you can see where the salvage is not, the fabric spreads further. Where the salvage is, it's tighter. So you can see the little ripples that lead up to the salvage edges. You don't want those in there. Always take your salvages off. I know I always say it's your quilt, there's no quilt police, you can do whatever you want, but set yourself up for success. Don't make things more difficult for you. I have said many, many times before, make a practice block. You'd rather find out a mistake in the pattern on a practice block than after you've cut out a whole quilt. Extremely frustrating when that happens. Measure as you go. You know, even if you're an experienced quilter, when I strip piece pieces, and actually I did it with the County Clare quilt. When I made my strip sets, I measured them to make sure I hadn't gone off track for any reason. If you just measure as you go, you won't come up with any surprises later after you've sewn a whole bunch of stuff together that's all wrong. That's what causes frustration. Again, set yourself up for success. And probably the most important thing is to have fun. That's what I started off with. Our hobby is supposed to be fun. If it's frustrating, stop, walk away. Don't be afraid to rip. There are times things don't meet up to my standards, and I rip. It's not bad. I mean, you just do it. It's okay. It's not anything to hate. You definitely can do it. And after you're finished making your quilt top, press, make sure everything's nice and flat, and groom your quilt. What does that mean? Groom your quilt. Cut all the extra threads off. Don't have big hunks of threads on the back of your quilt. It'll be a lump after it's quilted. Those are my best tips for things to do. Now I have a list of things not to do. We'll switch out the boards. I'll be right back. This is my list of don't do's to set yourself up for quilting success. And this first one here, I've kind of really touched on already with the Foundation Paper Pieced Quiltworks project, but don't pick a project you are not ready for. Practice first. Don't start a huge quilt with a technique you've never done. Make sure you like the technique, and if you really like to do it, go ahead and do some practice and be ready when you take on the real project. I say this over and over and over again. Don't follow a pattern exactly the way the pattern is written if you know there's a better way to do the pattern. And we talk about this all the time. I see it especially in the flying geese methods, the 4 at a time. Deb Tucker's method uses way less fabric, has less waste, and so you'll see patterns written and you know there's a better way. So many people say, well, I'm going to make it the way she said it the first time and then I'll change it later. No, if you know there's a better way, go ahead and do it the better way the first time. This one I'm a bit of a stickler on, and again, I know I say it's your project, there's no quilt police, but let's set yourself up for success. You need to consider grain, whether it's on the bias or straight of grain, when making piecing decisions. The classic example is half square triangles, and these dots are the sewing line, the black solid is the cutting line. You can do 2 at a time, where you sew on the bias, and then when you cut it, you've got all straight of grain on the outside of your 2 triangles. You can also do the 8 at a time, where you draw an X and sew a 1/4 inch on either side of the line, and then you cut on these solid black lines and cut here, and you get 8 at a time. And again, you sewn on the bias, and you then have a straight grain on the outside. You will see famous people take squares and sew on the straight of grain and then cut, and then all your edges are on the bias. That's just not setting you up for success. I don't know how many of you watch the HGTV shows. I love them, and they do renovations and they open up walls and they're like, this did this all wrong. This support beam isn't in a proper footing. That's what this is. This is not structurally sound. It's leaving out the support beam or the footers for the beam. You want to keep everything nice and straight. I refer to, you know how much I love Deb Tucker, but she has a technique sheet on the Birds of Paradise, and I blew up the unit here so you can see it. And in her instructions, she says, these are 1/4 square triangles here, and she says, you might think that we should do 1/2 square triangles there, but let me read exactly from her sheet what she says. It might seem like it would be better to use 1/2 square triangles for color 1 and color 2. In testing, this resulted in a very wonky unit. Keeping your grain lines consistent throughout these units is the way to go. Just take care in pressing because you are working with bias. So you want to keep the grain lines here the same. So this is a bias grain, so you want this to be a bias grain. You want your straight of grain to be all out here, and that's how this unit is constructed. You will find that these methods will give you a flatter, better quilt and lead to less frustration in quilting. The last thing on bias is the setting triangles for on-point quilts. You want to remember that the corner square triangles are 1/2 square triangles so that the straight of grain is on the outside, and your side setting triangles are 1/4 square triangles, so this side setting straight of grain is on the outside of your quilt. And most quilt instructions that I read do have you do that, but every now and again I come across one that has you do 1/2 square triangles for these. And as soon as you look at that, you say, I'm not going to do that because I want the straight of grain on the outside of my quilt. The last thing I want to say is if you're having a problem, stop. You can stay with it and analyze it, measure, look at the pattern, check that the measurements of what you have is what it's supposed to be. If you've made a practice block, that will help you. You can compare to that. But just relax. You can figure it out. And once you figure out what the problem is, because it's either going to be cutting, seam allowance, or the measurement you were given was wrong. So once you look at your unit, analyze it, you just go ahead and correct it and move forward with your project and keep on sewing and keep on having fun. They're pretty simple things, but I think if you do them, you will be a happy quilter, and that's what we want our community to be, happy and having fun. Now, let's get to the winner of the giveaway. The winner of the World's Greatest Scrap Quilt is Helen Petty Cord 2241. Please send me your mailing address to quiltersheaveninc@gmail.com and I will get it out to you. This week's giveaway, and I apologize to viewers who do not celebrate Christmas, but we got in a donation this beautiful fat quarter bundle, excuse me, not fat quarter, fat eighth bundle from Moda, and the same fabric charm pack. And we can't donate these to Project Linus because Christmas cannot be in them. So I know this woman who gave these to us, she just wants somebody to use them and love them. So if you would like to win this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and make a comment. And in the comment, write Christmas bundle, and you'll be entered to win. The one other thing in the comments section, if you have any ideas for videos that topics you'd like me to cover, please put that in there too. Sometimes it gets a little hard to come up with a new idea. So I'd love to hear what you folks have to say, and I will attempt to have a video on your suggestion. That's today's episode. So until next time, happy sewing.